How's it going, everyone? Greg here, and I'm here with my first review of a game, and I figured with the release of Alien Covenant, we might as well take a look at some other Alien games, and I'd give my own take on them. No, not Alien Isolation. No, not the other Aliens vs. Predator games. No, not the NES games. Yeah, that's right, I'm talking about Aliens vs. Predator, the 2010 game by Sega and Rebellion Entertainment. Alright, so without further ado, let's jump right into the game. So the game's main campaign is broken up into three different segments: the Alien campaign, the Marine campaign, and the Predator campaign. There is a multiplayer section, but I don't have Xbox Live, so yeah, I wasn't about to get it for a game that came out 7 years ago. So anyways, we got a lot of game to cover, so let's go ahead and get started with the Marine campaign. So the Marine campaign opens up with your standard fare. You know the drill. People discover alien life, they try to harness it, for their own capital gain, evil corporation gets overrun with aliens, and you're left to clean up the mess. It's been the same thing since Aliens, Alien 2, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, all that fun stuff. And I'm a little bit disappointed that they didn't try something new with the story. In fact, the Marine story as a whole seems to be pretty contrived and, nothing more than just a bunch of loosely connected sort of shootout sections with aliens and predators every now and then. But as we all know, the main defining feature of whether or not an Aliens vs. Predator game is going to be good is not necessarily going to be the story. Although it's nice to have an interesting story, it's more about the different gameplay experiences that you can have playing as the aliens or the Predator or the Marine. So does this game live up to that expectation? Well, I would say that to an extent it does. However, it does fall short in some areas, which I'll get into later. But for now, let's just talk about the Marine campaign and what it gets right. You begin the Marine campaign, as many survival horror games do, by yourself, alone, in a dark room, playing as a guy who you never know the name of. In fact, this game just calls him Rookie. Yeah, great one, guys. Way to have us get attached to our character. But anyways, like I said, the story's not necessarily the most important aspect. The next few moments seem to play out sort of like, moments from, like, say, BioShock. You wake up, you're given a weapon, and you're ordered around by a faceless person that you never see. Except in this game you do see, but that's not relevant. So anyways, you walk around, looking around the derelict area, which is, I have to say, it's kind of interesting. The set dressing as a whole is relatively bland, but it's cool to see the sort of alien motif going on, with all the Weyland-Yutani stuff littered around. As a fan of the Aliens franchise, I have to say, it was a fun experience overall. One of the most interesting things about this section is that it doesn't show you the alien until about maybe 15 minutes in. The rest of the time is just building tension. Now, granted, that tension isn't necessarily built in a very effective manner. In fact, I'd say that most of it was just amounted to dull, tedious walking around. However, I have to appreciate the game for trying, at least, Gotta give credit where credit is due. After the first encounter of the alien, which is done in a rather tense, suspense-building sort of way, the rest of the game just sort of devolves into a regular old corridor shooter. At times, it's done relatively well. You're fighting hordes of aliens, you're running out of ammo, you don't have any health packs left. In fact, I have to give the game credit for actually making me appreciate certain horde mode areas. You'll be sitting there calmly, and then suddenly you hear this horrifying music and this terrifying screech of the xenomorphs as they approach you, and you're given all these hundreds of weapons and things like that, and at that point there is going to be an epic showdown. And I have to say, those sections were very, very entertaining. It's just the rest of the game that I find a little lacking. The linear sort of corridor shooter with no variation and very little player choice. I just think it could have been so much more. I mean, imagine like an open world area where you got to explore the alien hive and that sort of thing, and you got to slowly liberate the area like piece by piece. That would be amazing. I just wish I had gotten to do that in this game. Instead, you're just trudging through dark corridors, going on the incredibly predictable linear story. It's not that the Marine section is bad per se, it's just I feel like it could have been so much more, with just maybe a little more time, or a little more money, or maybe a little more imagination. It could have been so unique and interesting. Let's talk about the alien AI, or the enemy AI in general right now. So originally when I saw that this game was made in 2010, my hopes weren't high for the ability of the AI to pose an adequate threat. However, in my experiences, it seems as if the AI was programmed with actual time and effort, unlike some other later games you might have heard of. Colonial Marines. But anyways, this really added to the game's overall likability. It helped me trudge through those boring, long corridors where nothing was really happening, because I knew that I would be fighting a somewhat interesting foe rather than just generic military dudes. At least, that is, until you start fighting Weyland-Yutani goons. Very, very disappointing. I thought that this problem was only limited to Aliens Colonial Marines. However, it rears its ugly head in Aliens vs. Predator 2010. Now granted, you don't fight the Weyland-Yutani drones for that long. In fact, it only happens in about the probably the last third of the game. But still, I thought it was disappointing, and I really think that if they were running out of ideas, that sort of thing, I thought they maybe should have just introduced some new alien types or something like that. I don't know. Different AI, different story. I just wish they had tried something new other than just fighting generic military dudes. It was altogether pretty disheartening when I first reached those sections. I just wish they had tried something else. Now that I've talked about a general overview of the Marine campaign, I get to talk about one of my biggest gripes with it. My biggest complaint, and one that really caused me to really consider lowering the score greatly, is the fact that I didn't feel that the license was put to use very well in this section. Now you might be saying, what are you talking about? You just gave it praise for, how you get to fight the aliens. Well, remember, this is Aliens vs. Predator, as in, I haven't mentioned Predator yet. And if you're wondering why I haven't, it's because he's barely in the game. As the Marine, you only fight the Predator once. What? Well, okay, you might say. I guess it makes sense in the lore. They are an elite race of hunters. It'd be, kind of strange if you were just mowing them down like any other goon. Does the game at least create a sense of dread surrounding this mysterious and powerful hunter having you cornered in the jungle with your teammates getting picked off one by one? No! You just open a building, and presto, there he is. Sadly, this is also the case for the Alien Queen boss battle. All you do is shoot some explosive barrels and that's it. No power loader, nothing. It's really, really disappointing. So just to give an overview, I thought that the Marine campaign was a little bit lacking in most areas. Linear corridors, standard gameplay, poor use of the Predators, some interesting Horde mode sections, and that was about it. Please, if you buy this game, do not expect to be impressed by the Marines campaign. Well, now that I've covered the Marine campaign extensively, and thoroughly ripped it to shreds, I should probably talk about the Predator and Alien campaigns. So, why don't we go ahead and move on to the Hunter himself. After the tutorial, the Predator campaigns with you going on a quest to reclaim your ancient hunting grounds. And the gameplay largely consists of the same locations and scenarios that you went through with the Marine, and I have to admit I did find this a bit disappointing. Although it was interesting to experience previous levels in an entirely different perspective, I wish that the developers had included a bit more variety with the levels. The gameplay in this campaign was interesting enough to push me through the repetitive levels, however. You spend the game traversing through the levels, hunting down humans, and fighting xenomorphs with a myriad of different weapons and gadgets. Aside from him feeling like he's on roller skates, the Predator controls relatively well, and you never feel as if it's shoddy control that was the cause of your digital demise. Just lack of skill. My main problem with the Predator campaign, aside from it being far shorter than the Marines, is that you spend an incredible amount of time battling aliens. While I believe the main strength of the games rests in your time that you spend battling humans. You might be thinking, yeah, isn't that the point of Aliens versus Predator? However, the fact remains that trying to fight these creatures is an incredible chore. The game provides you with contextual clues regarding whether or not to make a heavy strike, a light strike, or a block, and I feel that these melee sections feel rather contrived. If you have to tell the player what attacks to make during these sections, then what's the point of including them at all? It feels like an exercise in frustration as you try to stare at the game's suggestions instead of relying on your own skills to battle these creatures. Worse, if you try to deviate from these contextual clues, you will likely get your butt handed to you on a silver platter, as fighting these things is not easy. When this game mode really shines is in your encounters with the Marines. Cloaking yourself, laying traps, and sneaking up on your enemies never really gets old. The enemy AI is pretty stupid, but I would say that it's endearingly stupid, if that makes any sense. I always found it amusing when my enemies would try to shoot frantically while I was cloaked, aiming slightly to the right or left of where my invisible form was standing. Suffice it to say that the Marine sections were nothing if not entertaining, making them well worth your while. Everything I liked about the Predator campaign was made far more prevalent in the Xenomorph sections. While the core Predator gameplay boiled down to a standard stealth section with some interesting weapons and a serviceable story, the Alien sections turn these preconceived notions on their heads by providing an incredibly unique and entertaining gameplay experience. You play as Six, a Xenomorph test subject with probably one of the worst home birth videos ever. Aside from that, there's very little backstory that you need to know. The whole story boils down to, you are a drone, a mere servant of a much larger hive, and your one job is to advance the cause of the matriarch, following her every order to the letter. Although this story is pretty basic, it gets the job done, and it's supported by the incredibly engrossing gameplay. The alien's biological makeup provides a new level of depth to stealth gameplay, allowing you to climb walls, lunge at your enemies, and slither away into the darkness when injured. These themes are further accentuated by the relatively intuitive controls. When beginning the sections, I felt as if I was going to be sick, and as if I had no control over my Xeno, sliding all over the level, traversing walls simply by accident. This feeling quickly faded, however, and for the rest of the campaign, I experienced very few difficulties with the controls. You know, I'm not really sure what else to say about these sections, aside from the fact that they're incredibly fun. Luring enemies into dark places and taking them down with brutal cinematic kills is incredibly entertaining. And when you're inevitably spotted, you begin to take hails of gunfire, quickly piercing through your armored hide. And you can just slither away into dark places, waiting for the next optimal time to strike. Well, now comes the time where I get to mention a few things about the game as a whole, and I'll do my best to be brief. The game does suffer from a few performance issues, mainly where there are large numbers of aliens on the screen, so I definitely recommend picking this game up on PC if you have the graphical horsepower to run it. Certain areas with the Xbox 360 would just chug, especially this one place where you look at this, cloud of, smoke and debris. Whenever you would stare at the cloud, the frame rate would just tank. It was really, really strange. Also, the music was pretty bland. Aside from the classic sort of Aliens tunes, there were no tracks of note. The game devs also seem to be obsessed with random violin strings, even to the point where they occur when nothing's happening. You'll just be walking down a dark corridor and then suddenly, random violin string. Oh no. Tension. Why is that? If they tried to build suspense, then consider their mission failed. Overall, I enjoyed Aliens vs. Predator, but I felt as if it was majorly lacking in a couple of areas. Most major of which was its failure to use its license to its full potential. The Predator only appears once in the Marine campaign, and it really amounts to a lame boss fight, and only twice in the Alien campaign. Pretty unfortunate. This game also is incredibly linear. No branching paths, no decisions, disappointingly short Alien and Predator campaigns, and no real replay value. Unless if you're a completionist who wants to collect everything in the game, like all those tapes or the royal jelly for the Aliens or the hunting belts for the Predator. Despite these criticisms, I do think that you should check out this game, provided you can get it for a good price. It's currently going for around $7 to $8 on G2A, and I feel that's a fair price. Maybe fans will be willing to spend a bit more, but I don't know. Well, that's my first review out of the way. What do you think? Did you like it? If so, leave a like and consider subscribing. And if not, leave a dislike and let me know how I can improve. Well, other than that, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.